Did you think medieval monasteries were just quiet places filled with dusty books and solemn prayers? Prepare to have your mind blown. From the 6th century to the 16th century, these often secluded institutions were hotbeds of innovation and learning centers where skills so advanced they might surprise you were not just practiced, but perfected. What if some of the most surprising scientific and technical breakthroughs of the Middle Ages happened behind monastery walls? Number 1. Advanced medical practice and surgery. Scouses and stitches in the Middle Ages. Monasteries were basically the Mayo clinics of their time, offering surprising medical care. When you think of medieval medicine, you might picture leech collectors or superstitious charms. Tucked away within the quiet walls of monasteries, a different kind of healing was taking place. Monks were not just spiritual guides. Many were also highly skilled physicians, surgeons, and pharmacists, preserving and expanding medical knowledge during a period often mistakenly labeled as a time of ignorance. The Benedictine rule, a foundational text for many monastic orders, specifically mandated the care of the sick. This wasn't just a suggestion. It was a cornerstone of monastic life, leading to the establishment of infirmaries, essentially early hospitals, within almost every large monastery. These infirmaries were often open not only to the monks themselves, but also to the surrounding community, making them vital healthcare hubs. The medical knowledge cultivated in monasteries was a fascinating blend of ancient wisdom and empirical observation. Monks diligently copied and studied classical medical texts from Greek and Roman antiquity, particularly the works of Hippocrates and Galen. They also translated crucial texts from Arabic physicians like Avicenna and Rhazes, who had preserved and advanced medical understanding during Europe's so-called Dark Ages. Records from the Abbey of Monte Cassino, founded by Saint Benedict himself, show a deep engagement with these texts, indicating a systematic approach to diagnosis and treatment. This wasn't just passive reading. Monks actively put this knowledge into practice, observing patient symptoms, understanding the progression of diseases, and evaluating the effectiveness of various treatments. One of the most impressive aspects of monastic medicine was their sophisticated understanding of herbal pharmacology. Every major monastery had a medicinal garden, often meticulously planned and cultivated. These gardens were not just pretty spaces. They were living pharmacies. Monks grew a vast array of herbs, plants, and even trees, each with known medicinal properties. For example, belladonna was used as an anesthetic, foxglove for heart conditions, and willow bark, containing salicylic acid, for pain relief and fever. They understood how to prepare these plants, drying them, grinding them into powders, infusing them in water or wine to create tinctures and decoctions, and mixing them into poultices or ointments. A treatise on herbal medicine from the Abbey of St. Gall in the 9th century details hundreds of plants and their specific uses, along with instructions for cultivation and preparation, demonstrating a remarkably systematic approach to botanical medicine. This knowledge was often passed down through generations of monks, forming a living tradition of herbal expertise. Beyond herbal remedies, some monasteries also ventured into surgical procedures, a surprisingly advanced and often dangerous field for the time. While not every monk was a surgeon, certain individuals specialized in this area. They performed procedures such as setting broken bones, treating dislocations, lancing boils and abscesses, and even minor amputations when necessary. Records from the infirmary at Cluny Abbey indicate the presence of surgical instruments, including knives, probes, and forceps, suggesting that more complex operations were occasionally attempted. Perhaps one of the most astonishing, albeit risky, procedures was trepanation, the drilling of a hole into the skull to relieve pressure or treat certain neurological conditions. While fraught with peril, archaeological evidence from monastic burial sites occasionally shows skulls with signs of successful trepanation, indicating a level of anatomical understanding and surgical skill that defies common stereotypes of the era. Hygiene and cleanliness were also surprisingly emphasized within monastic medical practice. While antiseptic practices, as we understand them today, were unknown, monks understood the importance of clean water, fresh air, and regular bathing for patient recovery. Infirmaries were typically designed with good ventilation and access to light, and monks often changed dressings regularly. The water systems developed by monasteries, as you will discover later, contributed significantly to maintaining cleanliness within their medical facilities. Patients were often kept in individual cells or beds, reducing the spread of contagion. Dietary regulations were also a key component of monastic healthcare. Depending on the ailment, patients might be prescribed specific foods or restricted from others, reflecting an early understanding of the link between diet and health. Infirmary kitchens specialized in preparing nourishing broths, soft foods, and restorative drinks tailored to the needs of the ailing. The impact of monastic medicine extended far beyond the monastery walls. As centers of learning and healing, they trained many of the era's most knowledgeable practitioners. Students, both monastic and secular, often came to monasteries to learn about medicine, reading their texts, and observing their practices. When the first universities began to emerge in the late medieval period, particularly those with medical faculties like Salerno and Montpellier, they drew heavily on the medical traditions and texts preserved and developed in monasteries. The structured approach to patient care, the systematic cultivation of medicinal plants, and the diligent preservation of ancient medical knowledge ensured that medicine did not disappear in the Middle Ages, but rather slowly progressed, laying foundational groundwork for future medical advancement. Monastic infirmaries were truly groundbreaking institutions, blending spiritual care with practical, empirical healing in ways that challenge our modern perceptions of medieval life. Number 2. Precision, engineering, and mechanical clockmaking. Forget simple sundials. Medieval monks were building complex machines that would make modern engineers scratch their heads. When we think of medieval technology, grand castles and Gothic cathedrals often come to mind, marvels of structural engineering. But hidden within the quiet cloisters of monasteries, another form of engineering was slowly ticking into existence: the precision mechanics of early clockmaking. For monastic life, accurate timekeeping was not just a convenience, it was a spiritual imperative. The monastic day was structured around a rigorous schedule of prayers, known as the Liturgy of the Hours, performed at specific times throughout the day and night. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. These 8 services demanded precise adherence to time, making the accurate measurement of hours and minutes crucial for the very rhythm of monastic existence. Early medieval monasteries relied on simple methods for timekeeping. Sundials told time by day, and water clocks, or klepstres, measured the passage of time at night by the steady drip of water. While effective for approximate measurements, these devices had their limitations. Sundials were useless on cloudy days or after sunset, and water clocks were prone to freezing in winter and variations in water pressure affecting their accuracy. Monks, with their practical ingenuity and a deep commitment to precision, began to seek more reliable solutions. This quest for perfect temporal adherence spurred a quiet revolution in mechanical engineering that would eventually lead to the development of the world's first true mechanical clocks. Key breakthrough in mechanical clockmaking was the invention of the escapement mechanism, a device that converts continuous rotational motion into discrete oscillating motion, thus allowing a gear train to move at a controlled and steady rate. The earliest form of this, the verge and foliate escapement, likely emerged in the late 13th century, possibly from monastic workshops, or at least closely influenced by the monastic need for accurate timekeeping. This mechanism, powered by a slowly descending weight, used a system of gears to drive a foliate, a horizontal bar with weights on its ends which oscillated back and forth, regulating the release of the gears one tooth at a time. The sound of this constant, rhythmic tick-tock was a direct result of monastic pursuit of precise time. Building these early mechanical clocks required astonishing skill in metallurgy and metalworking. Monks had to work with iron and brass, forging and casting gears, shafts, and other intricate components. This was no simple task. The metals had to be precisely shaped, teeth on gears accurately cut, and bearings carefully crafted to minimize friction. The size of these early monastic clocks was often substantial, designed to be heard and seen throughout the monastery. They were typically housed in towers or prominent locations within the cloister, their mechanisms a testament to the ingenuity and craftsmanship of the monastic engineers. Records from the 14th century, such as those from the Abbey of St. Albans in England, describe the construction of complex monastic clocks, some even including astronomical dials to track celestial movements, which further highlights the sophisticated nature of these early machines. The development of these clocks was often driven by monks, who were not only skilled craftsmen, but also keen observers of the natural world and principles of mechanics. Figures like Richard of Wallingford, a 14th century abbot of St. Albans, designed and built an astronomically complex clock that not only told the time but also displayed the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, demonstrating a fusion of engineering prowess and astronomical knowledge. This clock, known as the Albion, was an incredibly intricate piece of machinery, containing multiple gear trains and complex computations, showing the advanced mathematical and mechanical thinking happening behind monastic walls. Such creations were far beyond simple tools. They were sophisticated instruments that required deep understanding of physics, mathematics, and material science. Precision needed for these mechanical clocks filtered into other areas of monastic engineering. Water management systems, often designed to power mills, provide fresh water for drinking and sanitation, and even operate sophisticated fountain systems, also showcased monastic engineering skill. These systems often involved complex networks of pipes, aqueducts, and sluice gates, demonstrating an understanding of hydraulics and civil engineering. The famous plan of St. Gall from the 9th century, while an ideal blueprint rather than a direct copy of an existing monastery, depicts an elaborate water system with multiple channels for different purposes, including baths, latrines, and kitchens, highlighting the early understanding of urban planning and infrastructure within monastic thought. Construction of massive monastic complexes themselves, churches, cloisters, refectories, and infirmaries, demanded an advanced grasp of architecture, structural integrity, and the logistics of large-scale building projects. Monks often acted as master builders, overseeing construction and applying geometric principles to create vast, enduring structures. The legacy of monastic precision engineering was profound. The mechanical clock, born from the monastic need for precise timekeeping, fundamentally transformed the concept of time in Western society. Before mechanical clocks, time was fluid, often measured by natural cycles or approximate human perception. With the advent of the clock, time became standardized, segmented, and ultimately commodified. This change had immense implications for labor, commerce, and daily life. The skills developed in monastic workshops, the careful machining of parts, the understanding of gearing, the pursuit of accuracy, laid the groundwork for the scientific revolution and the industrial age that followed. These early mechanical clocks, crafted by dedicated monks, were not just markers of hours. They were precursors to the complex machinery that would define the modern world, a surprising testament to the technical ingenuity flourishing in those seemingly tranquil medieval monasteries. Number 3. Masterful brewing and fermentation science. Your favorite craft brewery owes a huge debt to medieval monks, who were basically the original food scientists. When you think of medieval monasteries, you might envision solemn chants and scholarly pursuits. but a significant hum of activity, often accompanied by a distinct yeasty aroma, would have filled many monastic compounds. The brewing of beer and the production of wine, these weren't just simple beverages. They were vital foodstuffs, sources of safe hydration, and significant economic engines for the monastic orders. And what is more, the monks who brewed and vinted were, without knowing the scientific terminology, pioneers in the field of fermentation science, developing techniques that ensured consistency, quality, and often surprising shelf life. Water quality in the Middle Ages was notoriously unreliable. Rivers and wells were often contaminated, making plain water a risky choice for daily consumption. Beer and wine, on the other hand, involved boiling processes and fermentation which naturally purified the liquid, making them far safer to drink. Monks consumed beer regularly as part of their diet, often several liters a day, as it provided calories, nutrients, and a much safer alternative to unboiled water. For instance, the famous monastery plan of St. Gall from the 9th century, though an ideal blueprint, clearly shows 3 distinct breweries within the monastic complex. One for guests, one for pilgrims and the poor, and one for the monks themselves, indicating the immense scale and importance of beer production. Each brewery had its own specific equipment, showing a dedicated approach to the craft. The process of brewing beer was meticulous and labor-intensive, requiring a deep understanding of agricultural cycles and empirical chemistry. It began with the cultivation of grain, primarily barley and oats, but sometimes wheat or rye. Monks were often master farmers, managing vast estates that supplied the raw materials. The grain had to be malted, a process of germinating the grains and then drying them, which converts starches into fermentable sugars. This malting process, done in specialized kilns, required careful control of temperature and moisture. After malting, the grains were crushed and then mashed in hot water, in large vats. This mashing process extracted the sugars, creating a sweet liquid called wort. Temperature and duration of the mash were crucial for sugar conversion, a skill that monks honed through generations of practice, likely without understanding the enzymatic reactions at play. Next came the boiling of the wort, typically with hops. Hops were a critical addition, not just for flavor and aroma, but for their preservative qualities which helped the beer last longer, a significant advantage in an age without refrigeration. The introduction of hops into widespread brewing in Europe is often attributed to monastic innovation, particularly in the later medieval period. After boiling, the wort was cooled and then transferred to fermentation vessels. Here, the true magic happened. Yeast, although unseen, and its function unknown to the monks, began its work, converting the sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. Monks understood that a small amount of sediment from a previous successful batch of beer would initiate fermentation in a new batch, effectively practicing yeast pitching and propagation without knowing the microbiology behind it. They empirically selected for robust, reliable yeast strains by continuously reusing the best-performing cultures. Wine production in monasteries followed similar principles of meticulous care and empirical science. Monasteries in wine-growing regions, like Burgundy or Champagne, cultivated vineyards and managed the entire winemaking process from grape to glass. They understood the importance of grape varietals, soil quality, terroir, and optimal harvest times. The grapes were pressed, and the juice, or must, was fermented in large wooden vats. Monks learned about different fermentation temperatures and their effects on flavor, about the need for proper aeration, and the benefits of aging wine in specific types of barrels to enhance its character. The development of sparkling wine, for example, is often credited to monastic experimentation, most famously attributed to Dom Perignon, a Benedictine monk. The surprising element here is the monks' empirical understanding of microbiology and chemistry long before these fields existed formally. They consistently produced high-quality staple beverages, demonstrating a remarkable control over complex biological processes. They developed methods for cleaning and sanitizing their brewing equipment, realizing that cleanliness prevented spoilage and contamination, even if they did not understand the germ theory of disease. They practiced quality control, tasting batches, and adjusting their methods based on results. This systematic approach transformed brewing and winemaking from simple farmhouse crafts into sophisticated, almost industrial enterprises. The legacy of monastic brewing and winemaking is profound. Many famous breweries and wineries today trace their origins directly back to medieval monasteries, such as the Trappist breweries of Belgium and the ancient vineyards of France. Techniques and traditions they established, from specific recipes to methods of aging and preservation, formed the bedrock of modern brewing and viticulture. Monasteries, far from being isolated spiritual retreats, were dynamic centers of agricultural innovation, applied chemistry, and large-scale food production, demonstrating that even the humblest daily needs could inspire scientific inquiry. Number 4. Forensic book production and pigment. Chemistry. Think your smartphone screen is high resolution. Wait till you see the microscopic detail and chemical genius behind medieval manuscripts. In the Middle Ages, books were not just objects, they were treasures, repositories of knowledge, art, and spiritual devotion. And for much of this period, the production of these exquisite works was almost exclusively the domain of monastic scriptoria. These weren't just rooms where monks copied text. They were highly specialized workshops where incredible material science, painstaking craftsmanship, and deep chemical knowledge came together to create works of enduring beauty and astonishing durability. The surprising skill here lies in the forensic level detail and the profound understanding of materials required to produce these masterpieces. The very foundation of a medieval book was vellum, a material made from animal skin, typically calf, goat, or sheep. Paring vellum was an arduous and precise process, demanding meticulous care to create a perfectly smooth, durable, and uniform surface for writing. The skins were soaked in lime solutions to loosen the hair, then meticulously scraped clean of all flesh and hair using curved knives. After scraping, they were stretched taut on wooden frames, where they were repeatedly scraped, rubbed with pumice stone, and powdered with chalk to create a non-greasy, velvety surface that would accept ink without bleeding. Quality of the vellum directly impacted the quality of the finished manuscript. Records from scriptoria, like those of St. Gall, occasionally mention the careful selection of animal hides and the specific techniques used for their preparation, indicating a nuanced understanding of this crucial first step. Next came the inks. Black ink was typically made from carbon, soot, or charcoal, mixed with gum arabic as a binder, or from iron gall, produced by mixing oak gall nuts with iron vitriol and gum arabic. Iron gall ink, a complex chemical solution, would literally burn into the vellum over time, making the writing permanent and incredibly resistant to fading, though it could also slowly degrade the parchment if not formulated correctly. This required a practical understanding of chemical reactions. For red inks, which were often used for headings and important words, hence rubrics, from the Latin ruber for red, monks would use pigments like vermilion, mercuric sulfide, which was either mined or synthesized by carefully heating mercury and sulfur. However, the true artistry and chemical genius lay in the creation of the vibrant pigments used for illumination, the intricate decorative elements and miniature paintings that adorned many manuscripts. Unlike modern paints, medieval pigments were made from natural sources, minerals, plants, and even insects, and each required a specific preparation process. Ultramarine blue, perhaps the most prized and expensive pigment, was derived from lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone imported from Afghanistan. Creating ultramarine was a grueling multi-step process. The stone was crushed, then mixed with wax, resin, and gum. This mixture was kneaded in water, and the blue particles, being lighter, would separate and float to the surface, where they could be skimmed off. This process was repeated multiple times, yielding progressively pure and more intense shades of blue. Cost of ultramarine was equivalent to gold, and its careful preparation was a testament to the monks' dedication. Other colors came from equally fascinating sources. Reds could be made from minium, red lead, cinnabar, or from the kermes insect. Greens often came from malachite, copper carbonate, or plant dyes like sap green. Yellows were derived from orpiment, arsenic sulfide, lead tin yellow, or plant extracts. Whites were made from lead white or chalk. Each pigment had its own unique properties, requiring specific grinding techniques, often by hand with a mortar and pestle, and specific binders, most commonly egg yolk temper, which provided a durable and fast-drying medium. Monks had to understand how each pigment reacted with different binders, and how they would behave when applied to vellum. They also understood layering techniques, applying multiple thin washes to achieve depth and luminosity, often working under primitive lighting conditions. The application of gold leaf was another astonishing skill. Gold was pounded into incredibly thin sheets, almost transparent. These sheets were then applied to a prepared surface, often gesso, a mixture of gypsum and animal glue, and burnished with an agate stone, making them gleam brilliantly. This required immense precision and the steady hand. The intricate details, often visible only under magnification, demonstrate a mastery of fine motor skills and artistic vision. Treatises on illumination, some penned by monks themselves, contain detailed instructions on pigment recipes, preparation techniques, and application methods, revealing an organized body of knowledge regarding material science and artistic practice. The sheer durability of these manuscripts, many of which survive in pristine condition over 1,000 years later, is a testament to the monastic commitment to quality and their deep practical knowledge of chemistry and preservation. They understood how to create stable pigments, how to prepare a long-lasting writing surface, and how to bind the books to withstand centuries of handling. Monastic scriptoria, like those at Corbie in France, St. Gall in Switzerland, and Lindisfarne in England, produced some of the most celebrated and visually stunning manuscripts of the Middle Ages, such as the Lindisfarne Gospels or the Book of Kells, all testaments to this forensic level of craftsmanship. The monks were not just copying texts. They were engaging in an intricate form of applied chemistry and material science, preserving knowledge and creating beauty in a way that continues to astound us today. Number 5. Pioneering agricultural science and land reclamation. Your local organic farm, medieval monks probably pioneered some of their best tricks centuries ago, while their spiritual work was primary. Medieval monasteries were also major economic and agricultural powerhouses. They often owned vast tracts of land, and their very existence depended on self-sufficiency. This necessity, combined with their disciplined, systematic approach to work, led them to become pioneers in agricultural science and land management, transforming unproductive landscapes into fertile fields and laying the groundwork for many farming techniques we still recognize today. The surprising skill here is their methodical, almost scientific approach to improving yields and reclaiming land. Monasteries, particularly orders like the Cistercians, were renowned for their agricultural innovations. The Cistercians, founded in the late 11th century, specifically sought out remote, uncultivated lands to establish their abbeys, often in marshlands, forests, or barren hills. This choice meant they had to actively engage in large-scale land reclamation projects, turning challenging environments into productive farms. This involved massive civil engineering undertakings. For instance, they drained swamps by digging intricate networks of ditches and canals, diverting rivers, and constructing dams to create arable land. The Cistercian Abbey of Revolgues in England, situated in a formerly wild valley, transformed its surroundings into a thriving agricultural complex through extensive drainage and cultivation efforts. The monks introduced and refined the crucial three-field crop rotation system. Before this, many areas practiced a two-field system where half the land lay fallow each year. The three-field system involved planting one field with a winter crop, like wheat or rye, another with a spring crop, like oats or barley, and leaving the third field fallow to recover its nutrients. This system significantly increased agricultural output, as 2/3 of the land was productive at any given time, rather than just one half. It also diversified crops, reducing the risk of complete crop failure due to pests or disease, and provided a more balanced diet for both humans and livestock. Monastic records often detail precise crop rotation schedules and yields, showing their systematic planning and evaluation of agricultural methods. Monasteries were also at the forefront of improving soil fertility. They understood the importance of manure from their livestock, systematically collecting and spreading it on their fields. They also pioneered the use of marling and liming, adding calcium-rich soil or crushed limestone to acidic soils to improve their structure and fertility. Fish farming or pisciculture was another innovation. Monks observed strict dietary rules, which included prohibitions on eating meat on certain days, leading to a high demand for fish. They constructed elaborate fish ponds, often fed by sophisticated water systems, to raise carp and other freshwater fish, ensuring a consistent food supply. These ponds were carefully managed, with knowledge of fish breeding, feeding, and harvesting. Beyond crops, monks were also innovators in animal husbandry. They selectively bred livestock, cattle, sheep, and pigs to improve their size, wool production, or milk yield. They documented breeding practices and observed the characteristics of their animals, acting as early geneticists. Sheep farming, especially for wool, became a major monastic industry, with English Cistercian houses, for example, exporting vast quantities of high-quality wool to continental Europe, driving significant economic activity. Monasteries also managed large flocks of poultry and kept beehives for honey and wax, demonstrating a comprehensive approach to agricultural diversification. The scale of monastic agricultural operations was often enormous. They managed extensive estates with various specialized farms, mills, vineyards, and pastures. This required sophisticated management skills, record-keeping, and labor organization. Monastic account books preserved in various archives revealed detailed records of crop yields, animal numbers, labor costs, and revenues, demonstrating a rational and organized approach to economic management that was remarkably advanced for the time. This wasn't just subsistence farming. It was a highly organized agricultural enterprise aimed at both feeding the community and generating income. The surprising aspect of monastic agriculture is its methodical, scientific undercurrent. While they lacked modern scientific terminology, they engaged in empirical observation, experimentation, and systematic application of knowledge to solve practical problems. They observed what worked and what did not, continuously refining their techniques. Their discipline and long-term perspective allowed them to undertake projects like draining marshes or building elaborate irrigation systems that would have been too large or too costly for individual farmers. The knowledge they accumulated, from crop rotation to animal breeding, was documented and disseminated through their extensive networks, influencing farming practices across Europe. Monasteries were in essence early agricultural research stations, quietly revolutionizing how land was managed and food was produced, laying foundational methods that would sustain communities for centuries. Number 6. Early scientific observation and astronomy. Forget telescopes and space stations. Medieval monks were mapping the stars with their bare eyes and surprising ingenuity. When we think of medieval science, astronomy might not be the first thing that comes to mind, especially in the context of monasteries. Yet monks were deeply invested in understanding the cosmos, not merely out of intellectual curiosity, but from a profound, practical, and spiritual need. The determination of the date of Easter, a movable feast, required sophisticated astronomical calculations, often involving complex lunar and solar cycles. This necessity, coupled with the monastic dedication to scholarship and learning, transformed many monasteries into centers of early scientific observation and astronomical study, surprisingly contributing to the foundation understanding of the universe. The monastic engagement with astronomy was deeply rooted in their daily life. The liturgy of the hours, with its precise schedule, required accurate timekeeping, which led to the development of mechanical clocks, as previously discussed. But beyond daily time, monks needed to calculate the position of the sun, moon, and stars to determine the correct liturgical calendar, particularly the movable feasts like Easter, which falls on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the vernal equinox. This complex calculation required not just a basic understanding of celestial movements, but also access to and understanding of astronomical tables and mathematical methods. Monks diligently studied and preserved ancient Greek and Roman astronomical texts alongside Arabic treatises, which provided much of the foundational knowledge. Texts by Ptolemy, a classical astronomer, were meticulously copied and studied. Later, Arabic astronomical works, often translated in centers like Toledo, with significant monastic involvement in the broader intellectual context of translation, brought new mathematical tools and observational data to Europe. Monks pored over these texts, not just memorizing them, but applying their principles to practical observation. They were, in effect, performing complex calculations to predict celestial events and track the passage of time accurately. Many monasteries established observational posts or built astronomical instruments. While telescopes were centuries away, monks used instruments like the astrolabe, which they helped reintroduce and popularize in Western Europe from the Islamic world. An astrolabe is a sophisticated inclinometer that can be used to measure the altitude of celestial bodies above the horizon, determine local time from latitude, or for surveying. Monks also constructed armillary spheres, models of the celestial sphere used to demonstrate the motion of stars and planets around the Earth. These instruments, often crafted with surprising precision, were not just educational tools. They were instruments for serious astronomical inquiry. Records from monastic schools suggest that monks were taught to use these instruments, and their skills in measurement and calculation were often exceptional. Notable monastic scholars like Gerbert of Aurillac, who later became Pope Sylvester II in the late 10th century, were celebrated for their astronomical and mathematical knowledge. Gerbert was instrumental in reintroducing the abacus and Arabic numerals to Western Europe, which greatly facilitated complex calculations necessary for astronomy. He constructed astronomical instruments and taught these subjects, demonstrating a keen scientific mind within the monastic framework. Later, figures like Roger Bacon, a Franciscan friar deeply embedded in the scholastic tradition which monasteries influenced, championed empirical observation and mathematical rigor in science, including astronomy, advocating for precise measurements and systematic study of the heavens. The surprising element is the systematic, almost scientific approach to observation and record keeping. Monks recorded celestial events, such as eclipses and comet sightings, with remarkable precision in their chronicles. They observed changes in planetary positions and star patterns, and while their worldview was geocentric, their observations were often highly accurate. This meticulous data collection, spanning centuries, provided valuable information that later astronomers would build upon. They were, in essence, creating long-term astronomical database. Their intellectual discipline, rooted in the monastic routine of prayer and study, fostered an environment where careful observation and logical deduction could thrive. Monastic astronomical knowledge was not just confined to the cloister. It influenced the wider world through the development of accurate calendars which were crucial for agricultural cycles and civic life. The sophisticated timekeeping and astronomical calculations laid the groundwork for future developments in navigation and cartography. The intellectual rigor they applied to understanding the heavens fostered a culture of inquiry that, despite being rooted in theological imperatives, inadvertently paved the way for the scientific revolution. Monasteries, therefore, were not merely places of contemplation, but dynamic centers where the disciplined gaze of monks, focused on the stars above, surprisingly contributed to the very foundations of scientific observation. Number 7. Sophisticated language, deculason, and translation. Think your high school foreign language class is tough. Try deciphering ancient texts from forgotten civilizations. In an era before printing presses, before global communication networks, and before modern linguistic tools, medieval monasteries served as the intellectual powerhouses of Europe. They were the primary custodians of knowledge, and a cornerstone of this role was the astonishingly sophisticated skill of language, detones, and translation. Monks were not just learning new languages. They were painstakingly deciphering ancient scripts, translating complex texts from various cultures, and effectively becoming the human search engines and knowledge curators of their time. A surprising feat of linguistic and intellectual mastery. The very survival of classical knowledge from ancient Greece and Rome into the medieval period was largely due to the tireless efforts of monastic scribes and scholars. Following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, much of Europe descended into political instability. It was in the relative peace and order of monasteries that texts from authors like Virgil, Cicero, Plato, and Aristotle were meticulously copied, line by line, often in Latin, the lingua franca of scholarship and the church. This was not just a simple transcription. It often involved a deep understanding of the language, grammar, and nuances of the original text. A single error could alter meaning, so accuracy was paramount. Monastic scriptoria, like those at Vivarium, established by Cassiodorus in the 6th century, were explicitly dedicated to the preservation of these ancient works, ensuring their survival for future generations. Cassiodorus famously outlined rules for scribes, emphasizing the importance of correcting errors and understanding the text, which went beyond mere copying. However, the linguistic skills of monks extended far beyond copying Latin texts. A crucial wave of translation activity occurred from the 11th century onwards, particularly from Arabic into Latin. As contact with the Islamic world increased through trade, conquest, and centers of learning like Toledo in Spain, European scholars, including many monks, gained access to a vast treasury of knowledge. Arab scholars had preserved and built upon classical Greek texts, especially in philosophy, medicine, and astronomy, and had also developed their own significant scientific and mathematical works. Monks and scholars, working in close association with monastic centers, undertook the daunting task of translating these complex Arabic texts into Latin. This required not only fluency in Arabic but also a deep grasp of the specialized terminology in fields like algebra, optics, and medicine for which Latin often lacked direct equivalents. They effectively had to invent new Latin vocabulary or adapt existing words to convey novel concepts. Consider the complexity of translating a philosophical treatise by Averroes or a medical encyclopedia by Avicenna. This wasn't a word-for-word process. It demanded a profound understanding of the original cultural context, the author's intent, and the subtle shades of meaning. Translators had to be cultural bridges, explaining concepts that might be alien to a Latin-speaking audience. The process often involved comparing multiple manuscripts of the same text, identifying variants, and making informed decisions about the most accurate rendition. This kind of work was akin to modern textual criticism and linguistic forensics. The sheer volume of these translations was astonishing. Many of the Greek works of Aristotle, which had been lost to Western Europe for centuries, were reintroduced via Arabic translations, profoundly shaping medieval scholastic philosophy. Beyond Latin and Arabic, some monks also engaged with other languages. In places like Ireland and England, early monastic scholars painstakingly learned Old English and Old Irish, preserving epic poems, historical chronicles, and religious texts in these vernacular languages, some dramas, to aid understanding. The development of monastic schools, which taught Latin, Greek, and sometimes Hebrew, further owned these linguistic skills. Monks meticulously created glossaries, dictionaries, and commentaries to help future generations understand challenging texts. They were essentially creating the linguistic infrastructure necessary for scholarly inquiry. The surprising aspect of this skill is the sheer intellectual effort and dedication involved in bridging linguistic and cultural divides without any of the modern tools we take for granted. There were no online translators, no digital dictionaries, and limited access to native speakers for clarification. It was a painstaking process of immersion, comparison, and deduction. The monastic environment, with its emphasis on study, discipline, and communal learning, provided the ideal conditions for such complex linguistic work. They cultivated a deep understanding of grammar, syntax, and semantics across multiple languages, effectively serving as the guardians and disseminators of human knowledge across continents and centuries. The legacy of monastic language, motion, and translation is immeasurable. Without their tireless efforts, much of classical and Arabic learning might have been lost to the Western world. Their translations ignited intellectual revivals, fueled the growth of universities, and provided the foundational texts for later scientific and philosophical advancements. They ensured that knowledge was not confined to a single language or culture, but could transcend boundaries, a testament to the surprising and profound linguistic skills cultivated within the quiet walls of medieval monasteries.